Hey guys, in this video we're going to paint this. We're going to start from a sketch and I'm going to take you through the process from basic colors to adding shadows and highlights. Plus, we're going to do this all with the default brushes, so stick around to find out which are the best and how to use them. We're going to start with this sketch. You can download the Procreate file, color palette, plus a collection of my favorite default Procreate brushes for free from my website at jaywalkerpictures.com. Oh, and while you're there, check out my new custom brush set focused on sketching. It has 20 brushes from graphite, ballpoint pen, Sharpies, and even the classic Copic marker. Okay, so the first thing we want to talk about is the most important thing, and that is the light source. What I'm going to do is I'm going to select the sun color here, and then I'm just going to draw the angle that the light is coming in from, which is like going to be from this direction. So let me just draw a cone to indicate that so we can remember. Like that. So we're going to be getting a nice cast shadow on the house from this tree, and it's just going to look like a really nice sunny afternoon. And I'm going to start by laying in the base or local colors. We're not going to be dealing with shadows just quite yet, but there is one thing I really want you to pay attention to that is really important in landscape painting and just in painting in general, and that's how to use color to create perspective. Okay, so let's go up to our layers. I'm going to create a new layer, put that underneath our lighting arrow, and we're going to go to our color palette and we're going to choose green 5. And what we're going to do is we're going to start with items that are closest to the camera and then move into the distance. The part that's closest to the camera will be this section here, which would be just like a green grassy plain. Let me zoom out a bit. I'm going to use the selection tool on freehand and I'm going to set it to color fill. And now we're just going to dot the area that we want to fill. Oops, that's kind of off. Let me just expand that a bit. Okay, and we're going to do the same for this section here. And now we're going to create a new layer and we're going to paint this tree here. So I'm going to get my hard brush and let's just paint it in. Doesn't have to be exact, it can just be kind of rough. And I'm going to paint anything else that's green that's kind of in our main plane or focal length for our scene. So for example, this tree or bush here, this bush here, these two bushes. We've also got a couple of bushes here. And then if I zoom in here, we've got this other bush here or tree. This tree is going to be purple, so I don't want to go into any other color just yet. I'm going to stick with greens. And then of course we have this bush that's kind of behind these, but they're not too far behind. But because they are behind, I'm going to put them on a layer, and underneath that, I'm just going to do like that and paint it on that layer. Now I also want to create another layer underneath that, and this is going to be like our grass plane for our house. So imagine like, you know, the grass is directly outside of the house. That's still within our main focal length or distance. So I'm going to use the selection tool, and let's kind of just color this section in like that. Now let me just fix this up. Okay, now it's time to move further into the background and we're going to change the green color. And this is the really important thing I was talking about before about color and perspective. As we move further into the distance of our painting, we want to desaturate the color so that we get that sense of depth and distance. So let's go up here to our palette, and instead of green 5, we're going to choose green 2 BG. So I put BG just so I don't forget which one. But yeah, let's create a new layer, put it underneath all of this. And it's going to be kind of like this mid-ground plane, or just behind the mid-ground. So let me grab this and start filling in this section like that. And then we're going to create another layer above that, and we're going to grab our green 1 BG like this. And you can see that step change from our normal regular green to a more desaturated green, and then to this really bright desaturated lime color. And in the background here you can see there's mountains, so let's add those in. Let's create a new layer again underneath those layers. Now we're going to go to our blue greens we've got here, and we're going to start with the blue green 3. And I'm just going to create something like this. Create a new layer again, put it underneath. And then we're going to go to our blue-green 2 and do the same thing again. The exact shape isn't too important, it's up to you really, what you think looks nice. So then we're going to do one more layer behind that. Let's go with our blue-green 1. Okay, and just to finish it off, we're going to create a layer underneath all of this, and we're going to use our sky color. Just drop it in like that. And you can see that's kind of filling in these transparent sections, so we want to fill those in as well. So I'm going to go back to just underneath these 2 grass layers, which is layer 3. I'm going to create a new layer between there, and we're going to use our selection tool, and we're going to choose the yellow to streets color. So this is going to be a street. There we go. And there's also going to be a street over here too. So let me just fix up this edge. And let's just fix this up as well. So in our layers panel, you can see we put in this green plane here. And that is layer 6. So I'm going to create a layer on top of that. And I'm going to use the gray-green 2. It says roof midtone, but I'm going to use it here for this wall. Just to put something down. We can adjust it later. Yep. And let me just quickly fix that. Just tidying up some of these edges because they're a bit distracting. We don't want that sky color coming through. Okay, so you can see that sense of perspective already where we've got the normal or regular saturated greens in the foreground, and then as we go into the distance, they kind of disappear and fade into that blue of the sky. Okay, so this bright blue is pretty annoying right now, so let's go and fix that up. Let's lay in the foundation for the house. So I'm going to open up the layers. Let's go to a layer that is above, see this tree layer? So that's those bushes behind the house, but we want to be underneath this layer that has the major tree and also bushes that sit in front of the house. So I'm going to create a layer here, and now with that created, we're going to go in here and choose the yellow brown 1 house. Let me get my selection tool up, and let's just create a silhouette of this entire house. So this is actually a Japanese house, and usually they have kind of like a little bit of a decking. Then we go up, got the roof coming down like that. I'm going to bring the deck out, come down like that, and then have a bit of a lip for these stairs. It's okay if it's not perfect, we can fix it later and do that. Okay, and yeah, I just want to get rid of this bright blue. So let's do the truck as well. So I'm going to put the truck behind the house. Let's use the white color and do it like that. Okay, since I've done the van, I might as well do this cherry blossom tree because it is on the same kind of focal plane that we're looking at in this composition. I'm going to do it on top of the house, and we're going to go here and get our purple 2, and I think I'll just use a brush to do it. Yeah. And just kind of grab that and hit that silhouette. And I suppose the other item in this plane is actually this fencing here at the back. That'd be kind of like a dark brown fencing. I'm going to use this yellow brown 4. No, I'll use yellow brown 3. And I'm going to put that behind this tree layer. So right here. Okay, so that's enough for the midground. Let's move into the background here and get some of these buildings and trees and, you know, even this forest layer done. So I'm going to put a layer on top of the mountains, but behind all of our midground. Actually put it above these 2. Yep. And now I'm going to go into here and I'm going to get blue-green 4, tree shadow. And I'm going to create kind of like a line of trees along here. So just going to use our hard brush. Doesn't have to be perfect. We can refine the shape later. But it's just so that we can see that tree line. And let's create a new layer again. And this is going to be for these trees. So there's kind of like these Christmas trees here. And for these trees, we're going to use green 4. So green 5 was our main trees, but then green 4, these are just slightly more in the background. So they're going to be a bit more desaturated. And there should be some here. So we've got a big bush here. You can add more if you like. It's up to you. Maybe I'll put another big one here. Okay, so now I want to do these houses in the background, but I've actually screwed up a bit. I actually don't have a color for these houses. But now that you know my thought process behind all of this, we can just figure it out ourselves. So let's grab this color by holding on the canvas and selecting it. Now go to our color picker and let's switch to the classic palette. And let's just go here to the saturation slider and just desaturate that a bit. We can also slightly lighten it a bit just to distinguish these houses as being further in the distance from our main house. Okay, so let's create a new layer, put it underneath that tree layer and paint it in. Now that we've finished the local colors, we're going to move on to the shadows and highlights. The Procreate file at this point in the process is called Part 2 and can be downloaded from my website, so check it out at jaywalkerpictures.com. So we're going to start with our main tree right here, and also the smaller trees and shrubs and bushes that are in that mid-ground focal plane that we have going on here. So I'm going to open up my layers. Okay, I'm on that layer. I'm going to create a clipping mask. And what that's going to do is it's going to constrain my strokes to within whatever brush strokes I've made on this layer right here. So I'm going to open my palette. And remember, green 5 was the green that we've used for this. So we're going to go with green 6 for our shadow. And I'm on my standard hard brush, so let's color it. Can make it pretty big, and I'm just going to make a big kind of bulgy shape, keeping in mind our light source is coming down like this. And you know, we might have a secondary bulge here. Doesn't need to be perfect, but okay. And just to really hammer that home, let's go with the green 7, which is even darker again. Make it a slightly bit smaller and hit those really dark underside of those bulges. And just quickly blend that a bit. I'm not too concerned with the finish. Okay, let me go back to my green 6. We're going to do the same for these bushes here. Okay, let's grab our green 7, which is even darker again. No, we can't really see much because of the line work, but just trust that it should be okay. We'll sort all that out later. Okay, I also want to hit this set of bushes here. So we're going to go to this layer here, create a clipping mask on top of that, and then do the same thing. So our green 6. Now this one would be majority in shadow because we are under the tree. I haven't thought too hard about those major cast shadows. For example, you can see here these plants have their highlights still in there, but actually they would be underneath the shadow of this bigger tree. But we're going to deal with that later. For now, I just want to get in the major shapes and colors. Add in a bit more dark green here. Okay, now we want to start adding the shadows for our house. So you select the house, create a new layer above, turn it into a clipping mask. And now let's go to our palette. And right now we're using yellow brown 1 for the house. So that's kind of like already the brightest yellow we've got here. We're going to go to yellow brown 2. And the light source is coming from here. So we need to think about this as what it is. It's basically like a long rectangle or oblong. Actually, the brighter parts will be here, but then because we're going to have this shadow coming down, it's going to obscure it, and then we're going to have some dappled light coming through. It's going to be a really nice effect. So with this yellow brown 2, I'm going to kind of put it on the edges. You know, this side of the rectangle will be darker. Let me just demonstrate. So if I use a fairly large brush, and yeah, I'm just going to kind of do something like that, where we can see, yeah, the brightest edge would be here because the light's hitting it like that. But yeah, I'm going to need to start considering the cast shadow of this tree and its effect on everything else around it. So let's create another layer. That's going to be a clipping mask again on top of that. So right now this clipping mask is still using this as a clipping mask. It won't be using this layer, and we're going to use this just for the cast shadow. So go into our color palette and we're going to choose house shadows and kind of just cover this like that. Now I'm going to use a smaller brush. The general shape will be like that, but we're going to chop into it with our eraser and begin that dappled. And near the edges, I'm going to have that be more detailed or have like smaller dapples. In the denser parts of the shadow, I wouldn't have as much dappling. Now I'm going to switch back to my brush because I think I overdid it a bit. I just want to kind of come off like that. Yeah, I actually want this to chop off a bit like that, so to describe the form of the roof. So let me just erase that a bit. And we're going to bring in some of this because we want to emphasize this lip of the roof. So okay, and then I'm going to alpha lock this, and we're going to use the gray green 3, which is the roof shadow, and we're just going to color this portion of the roof shadow. It's going to be a bit more bluey green because the underlying color of the roof is going to be like a gray tile. Okay, and let's create another layer here. It's going to also be a clipping mask, and this is going to be our roof local color. So here we go. Here's our roof midtone, gray green 2. So we've got to move that above here. That's right. And you'll see I've got another gray green here, gray green 1. So that's going to be our highlight color. Yeah, put it right there. Just kind of blend it into that original color and have it peep through these dappled parts as well. Bring back some of that original roof color. It's getting a bit too strong. Okay, so now we want to continue this shadow onto the grass underneath the tree. So let's open up our layers menu, and on top of this layer, create a new layer, and it's going to be a non-clipping mask layer because we want it to go beyond the bounds of this original silhouette. And go into our color palette, and now we're going to choose blue green 4, which is the tree shadow, and let's just draw that. Imagine like this mass was creating a huge shadow under here. So just do it like that. It's okay to go over certain areas. I'll probably erase the parts that are over the top of these bushes, and we'll deal with those separately. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new layer above that, and let's color this trunk in. So I'm actually just going to color it this black grayish color. You can choose whatever you like. It's not too big of a deal. Just get a trunk in there. I know this is super loose. We won't actually see or refine things until we turn off the line work layer. So yeah, just have something painted in there. All right, back to the house. I'm going to go to this layer. Let's create another layer above it. And we want to color in this open door area. It it'll be kind of dark. So let's go to yellow brown for house shadows. This is kind of like the darker parts of the house. Let's just hit that. Okay, so there's two things on this focal plane that we haven't touched yet that are probably standing out to you, the truck and then also this cherry blossom. So I'm going to zoom in on these two, and we're going to choose this cherry blossom color because I don't actually have a preset color for this. So let's open up our palette and switch it to the classic palette, and let's reduce the brightness a bit and increase the saturation a bit for our shadow color. Let's create a new layer above, and it's going to be a clipping mask. And let's just paint in some shadow. Be kind of sparing with this because cherry blossoms are pretty bright. They don't have much in the way of shadows. In fact, this is probably too dark already. But let's just roll with it for now. We're going to tighten things up later. And let's do the car as well. So again, select the car layer, create a new layer on top, make it a clipping mask. And the same deal here. So I don't have a darker color, and I'm going to create it by reducing the brightness, increasing the saturation a bit, and yeah, something like that. And imagine the house is kind of casting a bit of a shadow on top of this car. And the other thing that's happening with this car is the windshield. It should be a darker color, so I'm going to color it this color like this. And then for this part that's in shadow, I'm going to make it even darker. So let's reduce the brightness again. Something like that. Probably even darker. Okay, let's move to our background plane, which is this house and these houses and trees back there. Let's find those layers. Here they are. Again, create a clipping mask, and we're going to do the same thing. So we're going to select that color, and then we're going to use our classic palette, reduce the brightness, and slightly increase the saturation. Keep in mind our light source coming from this direction, so maybe it might be like this. Again, we're going to select our houses, select that house layer, create a new layer on top, and make it a clipping mask. Now the light is coming from here, so let's select that color, reduce the brightness, increase the saturation a little bit. And we're probably going to make the roofs a bit darker, so let's select this roof color. Just use that, make it slightly brighter and less saturated. Okay, and just paint that in. And then let's finally do the same for these trees in the background. So let's find that layer, create a new layer on top, make it a clipping mask, select that color, reduce the brightness, increase the saturation slightly. Yep, okay. And then this is pretty rough, so there's no trees that are specifically outlined. We just want to do some rough shadows like that to give an illusion of a forest. All right, so we're almost done with the shadows. What I like to do at this point is actually just turn off the line work so we can have a look. And wow, look at that. There are parts that feel really weird. Like obviously this part is weird. We need to put in the tree trunks and all that. But this looks pretty cool. Like I can feel the painting come alive a bit. I know it looks pretty wonky in parts and kind of dotty and creepy. But yeah, you can feel that painting come alive. So let's just fix up some of these wonky parts before we move to the next step. So I'm going to turn that layer back on again. Let's go underneath the cherry blossom, create a new layer. I'm going to put it on top and turn off the clipping mask. And we're just going to trace over this shape, make our brush a bit smaller. Just so that we have something to work with later on. And then same goes for this other tree. I'm going to put this layer on top of here, and let's just draw that this trunk structure in. Okay, so that's the first pass of our shadows. We don't want to get too in-depth quite yet. Next, let's add the first pass of our highlights. So again, let's start with this major tree and the bushes right here. Let's go up to our bushes layer, create a new layer on top of it, make it a clipping mask, and go to our palette, go back to our palette selector, and then choose green 3 highlight. Now this one we want to use pretty sparingly, just kind of dot it there. And obviously like the part that's closer to the sun should have more or a stronger hit of this light color. And then these parts here should be less pronounced. We just want something subtle, no details yet. And then again, come here, put some onto here. We might have some in here. We just want to touch this so we can get a sense of the full range of color in this artwork. I'm going to skip the house. I'm going to go to the cherry blossom instead. And create another clipping mask. Choose our purple one. And this one should actually be more dominant because cherry blossoms don't have a lot in terms of shadows. Oops, it's not a clipping mask. Make this a clipping mask. Thank you. Okay, so yeah, actually I'm just overtaking most of the shadows. We'll have to fix that up later. Now we want to deal with this plane, this thick long grass here, and also the ground plane here. So let's start with this layer. I create a new layer on top of it, make it a clipping mask, and we're going to go back to our green 3 highlight, and I just want to touch this a bit, kind of blend it in as well. So we don't want to get rid of that mid-tone green, but we're just adding in some of this because it's obviously going to be very bright. And then see here, this is like really long grass, and so the upper part of the grass would be brighter. So we're going to hit that.
So far, this has been pretty straightforward. I mean, you can't really screw it up, but this next stage is where things can go really wrong.
Okay, so I think I'm at the point where I don't think I can go much further with the line work, and I need to make the leap across the chasm into turning this into a painting and not just be a coloring in the lines exercise. And I call this jumping the chasm because this is a really dangerous point for most artworks where you can really screw up. And me personally, I've screwed up a lot in the past where I thought I had a great basis for a painting and then I turned off the line work and tried to render it and it just fell apart. Over the years, I've tried lots of different things, but the thing I think really works well is to focus on a single element or focal point of the painting and render that up to a higher level of finish. And once you've nailed that, then you can use that as a guiding light for the rest of the painting. And so obviously our focal point of this painting is the house, so we're going to try to render that up more detailed and without the line work and see how we go from there. I'm going to jump out, we're going to duplicate this and have it as a snapshot because it's a really crucial part of the painting, and we're going to do all our rendering in this new file. You'll be able to download that snapshot for yourself to work from if you'd like, just to save you a bit of time. But yeah, let's jump into this one. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is actually turn down the line work. So we don't want to turn it off completely, we kind of want to ease into it. So let's open up the layers panel, go to our line work layer, select it. If you hit the N right here, we'll be able to reduce the opacity and just bring it down a bit so we can see a bit better. Let's bring it to 40%. Okay, so now that we've reduced the opacity of the line work, what we want to do is define the wooden beam structure of this house because the line work was doing a lot of that lifting for us. So let me just zoom in a bit on that. Let's grab our house here. I'm probably going to go on this layer above here, create a new layer. It's also a clipping mask, and go into our palette and choose the yellow brown 3 house beams. We're going to make our brush size pretty small, and we're just going to go over Oops, that's too small. We're just going to go over some of this. Yeah, just define that structure. So you imagine this is like the frame, and then these are like sliding doors. So that's a sliding door, and this is a sliding door. Okay, so those are like the dark wood beams of the house. Now we want to add some detail to kind of make this decking pop a bit. So if you imagine the light coming down like this, the top edge of the deck would be brighter. This plane here facing us would be a bit darker, and then obviously underneath the deck would be even darker still. So let's select that color. We're going to go to our palette. Make sure you're on the classic palette. We're going to reduce the brightness like this. And let's go to our layers. I'm going to create a new layer between these two, and let's just define that plane that's facing us. Okay, and we want to continue that with the staircase, so draw some lines. And then let's do a layer underneath that again for the even darker parts underneath. We're going to choose this color here that we use for our beams and put that underneath, kind of like a shadow. Okay, so those are the beams, and the decking has been a bit more defined. Let's turn off the line worker layer to see what we need to target next. So the thing that sticks out to me is this rooftop. It's really messy, and it hasn't been continued on this corner here. So let's do that first. I'm going to go to that layer. Here it is. I'm going to grab this original local color, and I'm just going to continue it along here. Just clean up that edge here. Okay, so let's turn off the line work. And the thing that really stands out to me is actually the separation between this roof and the body of the house here. There should actually be a really dark shadow underneath that to make the rooftop really pop. So let's add that in. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new layer on top of our beams layer. So that's our beams layer. Let's create a new layer on top of that. And I'm actually going to use the beams color itself. And we're going to use a slightly bigger brush size and just draw a big chunk like that. Okay, so now that that's done, you're probably thinking we've lost some of these, the nice beam color that we've got here. Let me zoom in on that. I'm going to move this layer underneath our beams. And then we're going to go to our beam layer itself. See, these are the beams. We're going to set it to an alpha lock, which means whatever I paint now is going to be restricted to this beam shape that I've painted. And we're going to select this color, reduce the brightness of it even darker, and then just paint in this portion of the beams with the darker color. So basically it means these beams are under shadow, and it kind of just makes them pop a bit more. Okay, so that looks much better. And you can see how we're not even going back to the line work anymore. I'm starting to really step away from it. But we can make this rooftop pop even more. So what we're going to do is go to the rooftop layer, add a new layer on top that's also a clipping mask, select this color, and reduce its brightness and increase its saturation slightly. Maybe reduce its brightness even more. And just draw a line all the way across. And I can also just do something like this. I'm just lightly coloring it. Okay, and let's go back to our original roof layer. I just want to tidy up some of this highlighting. Okay, that looks cool, but let's bring back our shadow just because we need to see it in context and see if it's actually still working. So this is our shadow layer, and let's turn it back on. And obviously it's covering up the details we have underneath. We want that to show through. So hit the N, and we're going to change the layer mode, and let's scroll down here. But yeah, we're going to change it to hard light and just reduce the opacity slightly. Bring it down to maybe about 88. Yeah, that'll do. And yeah, we're already starting to see things pop a bit. If I turn back on the line work layer, yeah, I mean, we're already starting to see some independence from the line work. These trees are looking a bit funny floating there, so let me add in some tree branches just to make it make sense. So do that. I'm going to grab this dark color and I'm just going to, ooh, it needs to be darker than that. Let's just freewheel it. Something like that. It needs to be above this. We need to see that. Okay, so we're going to keep going with this house. We want to keep making it pop a little bit more. We can actually make this bottom section pop. So I'm going to go back to our layers. Let's find this underneath section and I'm going to work on this layer. I'm not going to create a new layer for it. And let's just choose this color, reduce the brightness even more, increase the saturation. And we're just going to put a line underneath here, maybe like that, just to make that decking really pop. Okay, and I want to fix this edge up. It's a bit weird. So that's because of the clipping mask underneath. We're going to choose that original color, just paint it in. And then I'm also going to fix up this ground plane underneath to get rid of that blue. Okay. Also want to clean up some of this silhouette here. Yeah, I got to remove this. Okay, so these stairs are a bit pale or faded, so I want to emphasize them a bit more. Let's go to our stair layer. I'm just going to paint on the stair layer. I'm going to use this deeper brown color. And then just really emphasize that top edge of the stair. Okay, so that's as far as I can go with the house. I want to leave it here for now. I want to actually fix up this shadow here. And I also want to fix this car here as well. So let's start with the shadow. Let me bring back our line work just so I can see what I was doing. Interesting. Okay, so let's go to this shadow layer. I'm going to erase because that's kind of blocking the house itself. Okay, so I want to get rid of that. Just make it really clean. I'm going to add some dappled light. Turn off the line work, and let's also fix this car itself. So here's the car. I want to add like a tire underneath. Let's create a new layer. I'm going to make it this dark color, make it a bit darker. Something like that. And we're going to freehand it a bit. Imagine there's a bumper bar there. Okay, that looks pretty cool, and things are coming into focus. But now what I want to do is I want to explain to you what we've actually been doing. So it seems maybe a bit random when I go around choosing things or adding things in, but there is a specific process that I'm following. And to explain this, I'm going to zoom in on some of these small round bushes here because they're almost perfect spheres. So it's really easy to explain. Let's zoom in right here. I need to make sure I'm on the right layer. Okay, here's the layer. Okay, and let's use this one as an example. So far my process has been really straightforward. I've added the mid-tone green, I've added 2 layers of shadow, and then I've added a highlight. And most of you guys understand that. But there's two things here missing that will make this thing really pop out. So the first is the cast shadow. And let's create a layer underneath that. And let's grab the color from our palette, which is Blue Green 4 Tree Shadow. And I used that before for this tree shadow, but we're going to add it to this ball tree here. And it's not showing up. Why is it not showing up? Let's see. Okay, so that's a clipping mask of that. We need to turn that off. Okay. So have this layer underneath our original tree layer. And let's just draw in a cast shadow. Right. Actually, it would be kind of be going backwards a bit. So, and let me clean up this part. So, yep, and remove this. Okay, so that's our cast shadow, but it's still not popping quite a bit, and we need to put in what I call a contact shadow. So let's go here and choose Blue Green 5. And this is a deeper, darker, more saturated dark. And I'm going to paint this where the object contacts with the ground. So this is like the deepest, darkest parts of the shadow. And this is what really makes it pop out. And that's kind of what I've been doing when I was adding in this dark edge here, when I was adding, dark edges underneath the decking. These are kind of like the contact shadows or the darkest darks that really make these objects pop out. So let's go and add those into the rest of our objects here. So for example, this one, put in a contact shadow. Similarly for these. And let's go under the car. Also, the cherry blossom would have one. Okay, so you can see how that definitely added more depth and punch to a lot of these objects. So the other thing I'm looking for is when I observe this scene, where would the darkest darks be? And aside from underneath certain objects, we would also have really dark darks under here, because this is probably the darkest or most contrasty part of the scene. So we're going to start defining some of this tree trunk. Here's the tree trunk. First, I'm going to clean up the silhouette a bit, just chop that a bit like that. Just so that it looks like this trunk could actually support the weight of this tree, which is huge. Okay. And I'm going to make that an alpha lock so we can't go out of that silhouette. And I'm going to get this really black and just do that. Kind of like a contact shadow within the shadow, if that makes sense. And then I just want to define that form a bit. Let's do the same for this trunk as well. So here it is, an alpha lock it, and that's already fully black, but I want to add some highlights back in. Imagine like there's some of the dappled light is showing through. And yeah. Obviously, like underneath these bushes would be the darkest parts. And then we also want to continue this blue shadow of this giant tree over the top of these bushes here, because I kind of didn't treat them that way before. So let's go through and fix that. There's our shadow color. These are our highlights. So let's create another layer on top of that, make it a clipping mask. And I'm going to turn down the opacity on this shadow color, 80%. And just I'm going to leave some of this green popping through because it's really interesting and beautiful. Okay, are you guys still with me? If you are, you're awesome. Make sure you remember to go take a break, have a stretch or a cup of coffee. We're on the home stretch now, so not much further to go. Because this video is getting pretty long, I'm going to speed run this next section. Basically what I want to do is clean up these background items. So see how this just looks like a really wonky rounded brush shape. Clean up these edges, add in some of those contact shadows and cast shadows. That'll bring us through to the finishing section of this artwork, where I'm going to share with you a couple of default brushes within Procreate that I like to use to really add some texture and give a real painterly feel. If you've been enjoying this tutorial, please consider joining my Patreon. There you'll get access to bonus videos where I share extra tips, Procreate brushes, and you can also partake in the monthly drawing challenge. It's a great way to have fun and build a regular drawing habit. Your support allows me to continue making art and videos, so I really appreciate it. Alright, so here you can see me tidying up the background and adding small details. Next, we're going to look at a few of my favorite default brushes in Procreate that are great for adding texture to your work. Now, I've saved all my favorite brushes into this new set called Landscape Defaults that you can download for free. I'm not going to show you every single one because it would take way too long, but I'm going to focus on maybe 4 or 5 that I think are really good. The first one I want to show you is Evolve. So it's really great for doing a tree silhouette. Now you can see this tree silhouette is kind of bubbly and doesn't look very natural. So let's go to that layer. I'm just going to turn off the highlights so we can see that silhouette. Yep. And I'm going to select that color and just use Evolve to create the edges. And you can see how it's got a bit more variation. It's a lot more interesting and a bit more natural looking as well. Okay, and I'm going to switch my eraser and I'm going to choose Evolve for that as well, so I can cut into this shape and just make it look right. And just to make this dappled feeling seem kind of realistic, I'm just going to dab some gaps or holes to give the sense that the light is shining through. This is a pretty thick tree, so I wouldn't have too much, but yeah, just near the edges. And if you saw my last video about painting trees, like a lot of this will be familiar to you. But yeah, if you want a really deep dive into how to tackle trees, watch that video. Okay, let's turn back on our shadow layer and highlight layer. And we're going to try to use Evolve to blend some of this, just add a bit more texture. So on our shadow layer, let's go there and roughly use that. Increase the size of it and press lightly just to put down some texture. And then choose our mid-tone green, do the same thing. Just pushing really lightly, because if I push heavily it'll do that, so just want to lightly brush it over to get some of that texture. Okay, and then do the same for the highlight layer. So we're going to grab our highlight and do the same thing. And on the highlight layer, we're going to erase it with the Evolve brush. So make that a bit bigger. And we want to get rid of some of this round brush look, but we don't want to fully get rid of it. The key thing for this is having a mixture of brush textures. You don't want too much of one dominating the other. Now I'm going to create another layer on top of all of this, and I'm going to go back with my round brush and just add a bit more of my own natural stroke in, because right now it's looking too programmatic. So we just want something natural. And I'm kind of using this hatching style and using it to define edges or the form of these bulges in the tree. Okay, one thing we're going to do is we're going to grab the sky color and kind of merge it with the edges of the tree, just so it blends with the rest of the painting a bit better. Especially around these gaps where light is piercing through. Okay, so that was the Evolve brush, really good for silhouettes and just that natural kind of edge. All right, the next tree brush that I really like is Oberon. We're going to use that for the cherry blossom. So I know we did a bit of cherry blossom here, but we're actually just going to override all of that. Let's create a new layer, grab that purple color, and just with a fairly large brush, just kind of splotch it on like that. So let me turn off these layers underneath. And let's create a layer above that as clipping mask. Make this color a bit brighter and lighter. So increase the brightness. And we're going to make this really, really big. Just kind of you just want to let the brush do its natural thing. Something like that. I like how it's created that kind of shadow. And now let's fix up this. So I'm going to, oops, let's bring it down really low and then kind of cut into it. Just so it looks like those blossoms are kind of overlapping. The branches. Okay, let's go back to our hard brush. Now we're going to go to another brush, Nico Rule. So this one's a nice brush. Let's just make it small. Maybe choose a lighter color like this and just have bits of your branches coming off. Very nice. And just come back over and erase that again, just so that it loses some of that round brush feeling. Okay, so I'm going to use the Oberon brush again, but instead of for the blossom, we're going to use it to lay down a base texture for these grassy areas. So let's find those grassy areas. I'm going to delete that. Oh no, don't delete that. Go to that layer. So this was our layer that we used for highlights, and it's a clipping mask of our underlying shapes for these foreground grassy plains. So let's turn that back on. Let's grab this color here and make sure you got the Oberon brush selected and make it fairly large and just kind of run that over even bigger. I'm gonna get some of that mid-tone green back. Okay, so it doesn't need to be perfect, we just need to get a bit of texture happening. And now that we've done that, I'm going to demonstrate to you the third brush that I like to use, and that is the Nico Rule brush. And I use it just now for our tree branches, but this is just a really good general purpose brush, and it's kind of got a horizontal or rectangular shape, and it's really great for kind of drawing abstract grass. So let me show you how I do it. Let's create a new layer on top of that because I'm a bit scared to destroy it. Just grab one of these lighter colors and make sure let's see, how big is that? Okay, that's pretty good. No, I'm gonna make this a bit larger because we're in the foreground, so we want our grass to seem quite big. And just, yeah, I'm gonna use that like that, sparingly. Just, it looks like you're drawing with a big piece of chalk, really. And now I'm going to grab some of that darker tone. Now the key to this is to try to keep the grass going in an angle, like don't let it get too messy. It looks more aesthetic if it's all in one direction. And don't be afraid to use a larger size as well, because you're trying to define large chunks of grass and then use these smaller brush strokes as little punches of detail. So I guess I should have started with the big one first, but yeah, well, let me just do that. Now we're going to do this grassy section, and this is going to be taller grass, and it's going to be slightly thinner as well because it's further in the distance. So I'm going to choose this highlight color, and we want to make it smaller. So these grass strands were like 4%, so I want to make sure that this is smaller than that. So let's try 2%. Yep, okay. So I'm just going to do a few blades. These are really tall blades, and we don't want to do like all like this. Kind of just spread it out and be gentle with it. And then now we're going to get our darker tones. Go back in with our highlight color. Let's grab this one. Kind of emphasize this top edge. And then get that shadow color again and emphasize the bottom roots of the grass. So I'm losing kind of the definition between this edge and the top edge, so I want to kind of bring that back a bit. Okay, so I'm just going to move this layer above here, and I'm going to work this top edge a bit more because it's kind of getting lost. So maybe I can even increase the brightness of this and just hit some of this edge. Okay, and now let me show you the fourth default brush, and It's going to be this one, medium nozzle 1, and we're going to use it to add a bit of texture to these background mountains. So let me go here to this mountain layer here. I'm going to set it to an alpha lock, and then we're going to choose a darker color, this color of the tree line below it, and increase the size to a pretty big size, and just lightly work it over. More likely on the top edge and in this like recess of the mountain. And we're going to get some of this top color, kind of like a highlight color. Just bring it in the bottom so it kind of blends or goes from a darker gradient down to a lighter gradient towards our lighter green plane here. Yep, and then we're going to do the same thing with the next layer. So set this to alpha lock. We're going to choose a darker color. So let's choose this color from the layer below it and kind of darken the top edge of these mountains. And then choose the lighter color and bring it up from underneath. Okay, and then finally we'll do it again for this one. So alpha lock that, choose a darker color, maybe something around here, and then put that on the top edge. And then get our lighter color, which is the sky, just pull it in from underneath. Just want to lighten that up a bit more. Not so harsh. Alright, so now we are up to our 5th brush, and this is the final one, and it is also the most interesting or weird one. So I've saved the best for last. So let's go up here to our brushes menu and choose the Stickman brush. And we're going to use this brush to paint our streets. So let's find that layer. Here it is. Now make sure to set it as an alpha lock so that we don't go out of the bounds of the layer. And we're going to choose the color that is the layer. Which sounds a bit strange, but let's just put it down. So you can see here, there's actually new colors being added, and that's because there is a color jitter on this brush. So Procreate is telling it to add different hues, and it just makes it kind of interesting. I'm actually going to increase the brightness of this a bit, and that's a bit too bright. Let's bring it down a bit. Just roughly do that. Okay, so those were the 5 brushes that I really like. So we had the Evolve, we had the Oberon, we had the Nico Rule, medium nozzle, and finally the Stickman. I'm going to get in the zone a bit so I can focus on finishing this painting. Make sure to stick around so you can see the finished result.
Alright guys, here is the finished artwork. If you want to know more about how I achieved this finish, please consider joining my Patreon as a Drawing Club member. There you'll get access to a bonus video where I share 2 tips to finish your artwork, plus another default Procreate brush that helped me unify the painting and give it a cohesive look. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you there.